He gave her a job, not knowing who he had just let into his home. The town noticed her before she ever spoke, not because she made noise, but because she didn't. She came in on foot, dust clinging to the hem of her dress, her boots worn thin, each step careful, measured, like she had learned long ago that drawing attention came at a cost. And still, attention found her anyway. It always did. The street moved the way it always did, wagons creaking, men talking low, a woman sweeping dust that would settle again before the hour was done. Nothing changed. And yet, everything shifted the moment she walked through it. Conversations didn't stop. Not fully. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they bent, just slightly. Eyes lingered longer than they should have, then looked away, then returned again. Not curious. Not welcoming. Just aware. She didn't meet a single one of them. Her gaze stayed forward, steady, as if the road mattered more than the people lining it. But her hands stayed close to her sides, fingers tightening and loosening in small, controlled movements, like holding on was the only thing keeping her steady. The first place she stepped into was a small boarding house just off the road. She paused at the entrance, letting the quiet settle before she spoke. "I'm looking for work," she said. Her voice was even, careful, practiced. The woman behind the counter looked her over once, quick and efficient, already deciding. "We're not hiring." The answer came too fast, like it had been waiting before the question was even asked. Clara nodded. No argument, no second attempt. She turned and walked out, just as quietly as she had come in. The second place didn't go any differently. A general store this time. A man stacking crates paused when she approached. "I can work," she said. "Cleaning, cooking, anything." He wiped his hands, glanced past her shoulder, then back again. "We've got enough help." Another door closed before it had a chance to open. By the third time, the pattern had already settled into something familiar. She didn't change her words, didn't soften them, didn't push harder, because she understood now. It wasn't about what she could do. It was about what they saw. And whatever they saw, it wasn't something they wanted. By midday, the heat had settled into everything. The dust, the buildings, the air itself. And still she kept walking. Not faster. Not slower, just forward, like stopping would force her to feel something she wasn't ready to face. The ranch sat just beyond the edge of town, far enough that the noise didn't follow, but close enough that it still belonged. Wide land stretched out behind it, fences worn but standing, a house that wasn't polished but steady. It wasn't inviting, but it wasn't closed either, and she noticed that. He was outside when she approached, working with quiet focus. Not rushed, not idle, just steady. The kind of man who didn't waste movement, or words. He saw her long before she spoke, but he didn't stop, didn't straighten, didn't ask what she wanted. He simply finished what was in his hands, then looked up fully. They stood a few steps apart, neither rushing to fill the silence. The wind moved softly between them, carrying nothing but quiet. "I'm looking for work," she said. The same words, the same tone. But here, they landed differently. Not softer, not stronger, just heard. He studied her, not the way the others had. Not quick, not dismissive. Careful, like he wasn't trying to decide what she was, but what she wasn't saying. "What kind?" he asked. The first question anyone had given her all day. She hesitated, just slightly. Then, "I can cook." Simple words, but they carried something beneath them. Not pride, Not confidence. Just truth. He looked at her a moment longer, then past her, toward the empty road she had come from. When he looked back, something had shifted, subtle but real. "I don't need help," he said, and for a moment it felt like everything would end the same way it had before. Quick. Final. Unchanged. She nodded once, accepting it, just like she had everywhere else. Her fingers tightened briefly, then loosened again. A small motion. Almost invisible. She turned, ready to walk away, because that's how this worked. You asked. You were turned away. You kept moving. Wait. The word stopped her. Not sharply, but completely. She didn't turn right away, didn't react like someone expecting anything different. Just paused. Then slowly, she looked back. He had set his tools down. He was standing now, facing her fully. "You can cook?" he asked again. She nodded. "Yes." A pause. Then quieter. "I don't need much." That part mattered. More than the rest. He considered it, not quickly, not carelessly. "Then, there's work," he said. "Temporary." He didn't soften it. Didn't offer more than he meant. Cooking. Cleaning. Keeping things in order. She didn't move right away. Offers like this always came with something unspoken, even when it wasn't said out loud. "You can stay in the back room," he added. "No trouble." Not a warning. A boundary. Clear. Simple. Expected. She nodded once. That was enough. No relief showed on her face. No gratitude spoken. Just acceptance. The kind that came from needing something, and knowing when to take it. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the house. "Start with supper," he said, and just like that, it was decided. She stepped past him, into a place that didn't belong to her yet, but didn't push her away either. And that alone was different. Behind her, he watched. Not long. Not openly. Just enough. Because something about her didn't settle the way it should have. Not the way most people did. It wasn't how she spoke, or how she carried herself. It was something quieter. Something missing. Later, when he asked her name, she gave it. Clara. Nothing more. No hesitation. No stumble. Just incomplete. And that was when he noticed it. Not what she said, but what she didn't. She gave her name, but never her last one. That was the second thing. By afternoon, the ranch had begun to adjust to her presence, not comfortably, not completely, but enough to notice what she changed. Meals were on time. Work flowed smoother. There was less disorder, less interruption. Small things. But out here, small things mattered. Still, the questions didn't stop. They only shifted, growing quieter, sharper. "She don't talk much," one of the men said. Another answered, "That's not what bothers me." A pause. Then, "It's what she doesn't say." Ethan heard that. He didn't respond. Didn't defend her. Didn't dismiss it. Because the truth was, he had started to see it too. That absence. That space she left around herself. That careful distance. As the day began to settle and the light softened, Clara moved through the kitchen again with the same steady rhythm, but something had changed, just slightly. Not comfort. Not ease. Something closer to waiting. Waiting for something to shift, for something to break, because it always did. Her eyes drifted to the door every now and then, just for a second, then back again, like she was expecting something. Or someone. Ethan noticed that too. didn't ask, didn't interrupt. But he didn't ignore it. When night came, the ranch quieted one piece at a time. Voices faded, doors closed, lights dimmed, until nothing remained but stillness. Clara stayed longer than she needed to, making sure everything was in place, everything finished, everything controlled. Then she moved, not through the main room where anyone might see, but carefully, deliberately, toward the back. Ethan was still awake, not inside, but close enough to notice movement that didn't belong to routine. He didn't follow immediately, just watched. The door opened softly, then closed again without a sound. A moment passed, then another, and something in that silence didn't sit right. So he moved, slow, quiet, certain. By the time he reached the doorway, whatever was happening inside was already too late to hide. He stepped closer, just enough to see. And there, in the dim light, was something she had never meant for anyone else to find. By the third day, the ranch no longer felt the same, not in a way anyone spoke about, not in a way anyone would openly admit, but in the quiet spaces between routine, something had shifted. Meals came earlier, warmer, better, not heavier, not extravagant, just right. The kind of meals that didn't demand attention, but were noticed the moment they were gone. Clara never asked if anyone approved, never paused long enough to wait for a reaction. She simply worked. And it wasn't just the kitchen. That would have been easy to dismiss. It was everything around it. Small things at first, the kind most people stepped around instead of fixing. A loose hinge on the pantry door tightened without a word. Supplies once scattered without order, now stacked with quiet intention. Tools that had been missing for weeks found their way back to where they belonged. No one saw her do it. No one heard her claim it. Things were simply better. Ethan noticed, not because he was searching for change, but because things stopped going wrong, and on a place like this, that didn't happen without reason. He watched her more now, never close enough to be obvious, never long enough to invite questions, but enough to see the pattern. Clara didn't move like someone trying to prove she belonged. She moved like someone who already understood what was needed and saw no reason to explain it. It was the boy who spoke to her first, not one of the men, not someone with suspicion, but a child sent from the neighboring land with a message that didn't require conversation. He lingered in the doorway longer than necessary, watching her, waiting without knowing exactly for what. Clara noticed him but didn't rush him, didn't force the moment into something it wasn't. She finished what she was doing, then lowered herself just slightly to meet his height. "You're waiting," she said. The boy nodded, shifting his weight before finally speaking. "You cook different." She tilted her head just slightly. "Is that a complaint?" He shook his head quickly. "No." A pause followed, small but certain. "It's better." She didn't smile, not fully, but something in her softened, something that hadn't shifted since she arrived. And she didn't answer right away, because words like that carried more weight than they should. After that, the boy returned, sometimes with reason, sometimes without, staying longer than necessary, asking quiet questions, watching her hands as she worked, and Clara let him, never pushing him away, never pulling him closer either. Ethan noticed that too, not the visits themselves, but the change they brought with them, subtle, nearly invisible, but real. One afternoon, he found her seated at the table, a piece of fabric in her hands, needle threaded, stitching with slow, deliberate precision. Not rushed, not uneven, each motion controlled like she had done it long before this place, long before this life. "You sew," he said. She didn't look up immediately, finishing the stitch before answering. "Yes." He stepped closer, just enough to see the detail. "That's not ranch work." She met his gaze briefly. "No," a pause settled between them before she added, "but it holds things together." The words lingered longer than expected. Later, he saw her with the books, not hidden this time, not entirely, just placed slightly out of sight, ledger pages open, numbers aligned, corrected, balanced with quiet certainty. She wasn't guessing, wasn't learning as she went. She already knew. That was when the question shifted, no longer what she could do, but where she had learned it, and questions like that didn't lead to simple answers. The ranch had begun to adjust to her presence, not comfortably, not completely, but enough that her absence would have been noticed, even if no one said it aloud. "She's not like the others," the boy said one evening, his voice quiet but certain as he sat at the edge of the porch. Ethan didn't respond because he had already reached the same conclusion. But being different wasn't the same as being understood. That night, the ranch fell into its usual silence, the same rhythm, the same stillness, but this time Ethan didn't let it pass without question. He had seen enough, not everything, but enough to know there was more, and more meant truth. He moved through the house without sound, not searching openly, not drawing attention, just looking. Her room was simple, too simple for someone who carried as much as she did, which meant what mattered wasn't left in plain sight. He found it where most wouldn't think to look, folded carefully, hidden among things that held no value. A paper, worn at the edges, handled with care. He opened it slowly, not out of hesitation, but because something in him already understood that this would change things. The name wasn't Clara, not fully, not the way she had said it. There was more to it, something longer, something that didn't belong to the life she had shown. Not poor, not ordinary, not someone who should have been standing in his kitchen asking for work. He didn't react, didn't call out, didn't confront her. Instead, he folded it back the way he found it, placed it exactly where it had been, and stepped away, because knowing something and saying it were not the same thing. And for the first time since she arrived, Ethan chose silence, but this silence was different. This one was watching. Ethan now knew. She was lying about who she was. The man didn't arrive with noise. He didn't need to. By the time anyone noticed him, he was already there, standing just off the main road with a stillness that didn't belong to travelers passing through. His coat carried dust from distance, but not fatigue. His boots were worn, but not careless, and the way he looked at people wasn't the way strangers looked. It was the way someone looked when they already knew what they were searching for. The town felt it before it understood it. Conversations shortened. Eyes followed him the way they had followed Clara, but for a different reason. Not quiet curiosity, not uncertainty. This was something sharper, more deliberate. He asked questions, but not many, just enough. "A woman," he said to the first man willing to answer, "passed through here." He didn't describe her all at once. Not everything, just pieces, enough to let people fill in the rest. Dark hair, kept to herself, works more than she speaks. And slowly, quietly, the shape of Clara began to form in their minds, the same way it had the day she arrived. But this time, it didn't come with silence. It came with recognition. Word moved without being carried. It shifted through the town in glances, in lowered voices, in the way people suddenly remembered things they hadn't thought important before. And by the time the man reached the edge of the ranch, the town already knew something was wrong. Clara felt it before she heard it. The air had changed. Not around her, but toward her. The way people looked. The way they didn't look. The way conversations ended just before she came close enough to hear them. She didn't ask why. She already knew. Because this part was familiar. It always started the same way. Quietly, slowly, until it wasn't quiet anymore. One of the ranch hands said it first, not to her, not directly, but loud enough that it reached where she stood. "Man's looking for someone." Another answered, "Says she don't belong where she is." A pause. Then the words that settled heavier than the rest. "Says she's not who she claims to be." Clara didn't stop what she was doing. Not immediately. Her hands continued their work, steady, controlled, as if the rhythm alone could keep everything from shifting. But something inside her had already gone still, because she had heard that before. Different town. Different voices. Same meaning. It didn't matter how far she went. It didn't matter how careful she was. Eventually, it followed. Ethan heard it too. Not all at once. Not clearly. But enough. Enough to know that whatever he had chosen not to ask was no longer staying hidden. The man reached the ranch before sunset. Didn't rush. Didn't hesitate. Just walked forward like he had every right to be there. Ethan met him outside. No words at first. Just silence that carried weight on both sides. "You've got someone working here," the man said. Ethan didn't answer right away. Didn't confirm. Didn't deny. The man studied him, then added, "She didn't tell you everything." That wasn't a question either. It was a statement. One meant to settle into the space between them and stay there. "What is it you think I don't know?" Ethan asked. The man's expression didn't change. "That she doesn't belong here." The words were simple, direct, and they landed exactly where they were meant to. "She comes from somewhere else," the man continued. "Somewhere with a name that matters. A family that's been looking for her. Or maybe," he paused just slightly, "a situation she chose to leave behind." He let that sit. Then added, quieter now, "Either way, she's not who she says she is." Clara heard enough. Not every word. Not every detail. But enough to understand what was happening. She didn't step outside. Didn't interrupt. Didn't defend herself. Because defense required explanation. And explanation meant going back. She stepped away instead. Quietly. Like she had arrived. Back into the room that held nothing of hers, and yet everything she had left. Her movements were the same as always. Controlled. Measured. But this time, they carried something else. Finality. She gathered what little she had. Not much. It never was. Things that could be carried easily. Things that could be left behind without notice. Because that was how you survived this. You didn't wait. You didn't argue. You left before they had to ask you to. Outside, the conversation continued, but it no longer mattered. Not the details. Not the truth of it. Only the outcome. Because she already knew how it ended. She's not who she says she is. The words reached her clearly this time. Not distant. Not uncertain. And something in her stilled completely. Not fear. Not panic. Recognition. This was the moment everything changed. The moment it always changed. And for a second, just a second, she allowed herself to feel it. Not the loss of the place. Not the work. But the quiet things. The boy's voice at the doorway. The stillness of the kitchen in the early morning. The way Ethan never asked more than she could give. Then she let it go. Because holding on to it would only make leaving harder. Ethan didn't move right away after the man finished speaking. He stood there, the words settling into something heavier than accusation. Because none of it surprised him. Not fully. He had seen enough. known enough. The letter had told him that much. But hearing it spoken aloud changed something, made it real in a way silence hadn't. "You planning to take her back?" he asked. The man's answer was simple. "If she comes willingly." A pause. "And if she doesn't, I'll make sure she understands her options." That was when Ethan turned. Not quickly, not urgently, but with certainty, because something in the timing didn't sit right. He stepped toward the house. The door was open. The room inside empty. No sound, no movement, just absence. And it said more than anything else could have. Because she hadn't waited. She hadn't argued. She hadn't given him the chance to decide. She had already made the choice for him, the same way she always had to. By the time he stepped outside again, she was already gone. No trace left behind except the quiet she had carried with her when she arrived. And this time, she didn't wait for him to send her away. Clara didn't run. She never did. Running drew attention, and attention had always come at a cost she couldn't afford to pay twice. So when she left the ranch, she did it the only way she knew how, quietly, steadily, one step at a time, as if the road had always been hers to walk. But this time, the town was watching. Word had already moved ahead of her, not loudly, not all at once, but in fragments, in whispers that passed between people who suddenly had reason to pay attention. By the time she reached the center of town, the air had changed. It wasn't avoidance anymore. It was gathering. People slowed, turned, watched, not with uncertainty, but with something sharper, something closer to judgment. "She's the one." The words came from behind her, followed by another voice, quieter but certain. "That's her." Clara didn't stop, didn't look back, because turning around meant facing something she already understood, and she wasn't ready to give it that power. The man was waiting where the road narrowed, where passing him meant there was no space left for silence. He hadn't moved much since arriving, hadn't needed to, because he knew this moment would come. Eventually, it always did. Clara. He said her name differently this time, not the one she had given, but the one she had left behind. She stopped, not because he called her, but because she recognized what followed. "You've gone far enough." His voice was calm, controlled, like this wasn't a pursuit, just a correction. The town had closed in now, not in distance, but in attention. Every eye settled into the space between them, waiting for something to unfold. Clara turned slowly and faced him. For the first time since she arrived, she didn't look past someone. She looked directly at him. "I told you," she said quietly, "I'm not going back." Her voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. "You don't get to decide that," he replied, just loud enough for the others to hear. "Not after what you left behind." The words settled deeper than they sounded, because whatever story the town had begun to build, it had just changed. "She's not who she says she is." This time the words came clearer, closer, no longer hidden behind distance. And no one corrected it. Clara felt the shift, not in the accusation, but in the way the space around her began to close, the way a place stopped being neutral and started deciding. She didn't defend herself, didn't offer explanation. She had done that before, in other towns, with other people, and it never changed how the story ended. "Come with me," the man said, not forceful, not urgent, just certain, like there were only two directions left and neither belonged to her. For a moment, it looked like she might move, not because she agreed, but because this was the part where resistance stopped making sense, where staying cost more than leaving. Then something changed. Not in front of her, behind her. Footsteps, slow, even, deliberate, carried through the stillness in a way that made people turn before they realized they had moved. Ethan stepped forward, not rushed, not dramatic, just certain, until he stood between her and the man, closing the space without needing to say a word. The town went still. Completely. Because this was not expected. The man's expression shifted, not to confusion, but recognition. "You know who she is?" he asked, testing, measuring what stood in front of him. Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes. The answer came without weight, without conflict, just truth. A pause followed, long enough for the town to lean into it, to expect what came next, because this was where it always changed, where distance returned, where logic overruled whatever came before. But it didn't. "And I know who she chose to be." The words didn't rise, didn't echo, but they landed heavier than anything that had been said. Something shifted again, quieter this time, harder to name, but impossible to ignore. Because that wasn't defense. That wasn't denial. That was a decision. The man studied him carefully, weighing not just the words, but the consequences behind them. "You're willing to stand on that?" he asked, the question carrying more than it revealed. Ethan didn't look away. Yes. No explanation. No justification. Just the answer. And in that moment something changed. Not for the town, not for the man, but for Clara. Because this was new. Not someone asking her to explain. Not someone waiting to decide. But someone who already knew and had chosen anyway. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, thick with judgment, uncertainty, and something none of them had expected to witness. The man exhaled slowly and stepped back, not defeated, not finished, just paused. "This doesn't end here," he said, not as a threat, but as something inevitable. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to, because the only thing that mattered had already been made clear. The space remained still, suspended between what had been said and what would come next. And for the first time since she arrived, Clara wasn't being watched as someone passing through. She was being watched as someone who might stay. But that part hadn't been decided. Not yet. Because now, for the first time, no one was choosing for her. Now, the silence didn't push her forward or pull her back. Now, the choice was hers. The silence didn't break all at once. It softened, slowly, like something heavy being set down instead of dropped. The town was still watching, but the weight of their attention had changed. It was no longer pushing her away. It was waiting. Clara stood where she was, the dust of the road still beneath her feet, the past still close enough to feel, but for the first time, it wasn't pulling her backward. Ethan didn't move toward her immediately. He didn't reach, didn't speak, because this wasn't a moment that could be guided. It had to be chosen. When he finally stepped closer, it wasn't to stop her. It wasn't to hold her in place. It was simply to stand beside her, not in front, not between her and the world, but next to her, where the decision belonged. "You don't have to go back," he said, his voice quiet, steady, without pressure. "And you don't have to stay because of this." A small pause settled between them, the kind that asked for truth without demanding it. "But if you stay, it won't be temporary." He let that sit, unforced, unchanged. "It'll be yours. If you want it." Clara didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved, not to the man who had come for her, not to the town that had judged her, but to the space she had almost left behind. The ranch. The mornings that asked nothing from her except presence. The quiet work that didn't question her worth. The boy's voice in the doorway. The stillness she had begun to trust. She drew in a breath, slow, careful, like she was measuring something she hadn't allowed herself to hold before. "I wasn't honest," she said, the words simple, unguarded, finally without distance. Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't correct. "You stayed," he replied, just as quietly, as if that was the only part that mattered. The words settled into her in a way nothing else had. Not accusation, not expectation, just truth. She let out the breath she had been holding longer than she realized. "I was running." The admission came softer, but clearer than anything she had said before. A pause followed, not uncertain, but necessary. "But I'm not any more." Nothing moved right away. Not the town. Not the man who had come for her. Not even Ethan. Because this was the moment everything had been building toward, and it didn't need noise to make it real. Clara looked forward, not at the road that led away, but at the place she had already begun to build without knowing it. And this time, when she took a step, it wasn't away. It was back. She stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go. Not because someone had asked her to. But because, for the first time, it was a place she chose.